welcome to the second video of the week. What I'm going to do in this video is go over the last 3 articles that we read for this week, as well as a new feature that I'm adding to our Facebook group. So I'll start up here with what I've got written on the board, and basically what I did was I read the last 3 articles and I found themes and concepts and ideas that overlap in each one of those texts. And what I'm trying to help you guys learn how to do is to put these different texts that we're reading in conversation with one another. When I say to put things in conversation with one another, what I mean is imagine that you've got the authors of all 4 of our texts for this week sitting at a table, right? So we have a big round top table and all of us are sitting around that table, me and you included. What would happen, what would these people choose to talk about after they've read their papers? We read all 4 of the papers. After they've read these papers, what would the conversation be after that? What would the resulting conversation be? What interests do these people share, and what might they say about it, or how might they argue about it? Because as we know, these people don't always agree on the different concepts that they're talking about. So would they start a fight with one another? Would they just merely casually agree with one another? Would it be really chill, or would it be really controversial? So what I've done is just found different pieces of this week. I found that in all 4 of our readings, which come from 2 different sections of our textbook, what's really being shown near the end of this textbook is the feminist questions, or the feminist revisions that are being taking place in our society. So in the first part of our semester, we spent a lot of time just learning feminist theory. What does it mean to be a feminist? What does it mean to study women and gender studies? What kinds of things are we looking at? What kinds of things are we examining? Last week we looked at a lot of just kind of pop culture stuff that we're looking at and examining, and we've been doing that all semester. And you guys have been taking that in a totally different direction in your events posting, and you've been looking at what feminism is doing around the world, or outside of the stuff that we're studying for our class. And so we're starting to see near the end of the semester what other types of things feminists are doing. So we read the article about the bones, and I mentioned that feminists are asking those kinds of questions. But the real question, the real basic question that feminists are asking is, what happens when women have no control over their bodies? That's the primary feminist question. So I have it written up here because we can basically boil down everything that's being said in all of these articles to this one question. What happens when women have no control over their bodies? And it kind of seems odd that we would have to fight for control of our bodies. But this is not just a female thing. It's not just women who are having to fight for control of their bodies, as the article on the fraternities might have shown you. So as we walk through here, what I'm going to be doing is just reading through some of the concepts that I have on the board, expounding upon those, and then I've also printed off a set of questions that I offered to you guys on this week's doc board. And I'll talk about that a little bit more toward the end of the video. So we'll start at the top. What happens when women have no control over their bodies? And the first author that we read for this week, let me see if I can get her name, Thompson. She divides her article into several different sections. Her article is called A Way Out of No Way, and it's the one, to jog your memory, Thompson's article is the one about eating disorders. So she talks about the way that women get eating disorders, the way they acquire these eating disorders. And it's not just because of food, she found, it's because of several different things. It's because of trauma, poverty, heterosexism, racism, and then all these other things that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. These are her 4 main entries. She basically says that women who were abused or traumatized in any way as children can, even as children, develop eating disorders or sensitivities about eating and about their weight because of things that happened to them in childhood. So one way that happens, one type of trauma, is the trauma of poverty. When women grow up very poor, or when anyone grows up very poor, a certain set of class expectations are placed upon them, in the same way that race expectations are placed upon them, and also heterosexist expectations are placed upon them. All of these things, poverty, racism, heterosexism, they put us inside of a box. They confine us to a specific way of thinking and a way of being and a way of knowing. Now, this is not innate to human beings. It's not innate to human beings to be heterosexual. It's not innate to human beings to live in a class system, a poverty system, or the rich and the poor in a hierarchy like that. And it's not innate to human beings to see race the way that we do. All of these things, all of the way that we see race, class, and gender, that's all our decision as a society. We constructed these ways of seeing these things, and because they're constructed, they're used as tools to oppress things that are undesirable. So let's just take heterosexism, for example. You guys know heterosexuality is when a man and a woman are, a socially functioning man and a socially functioning woman are together in a relationship, in a usually monogamous relationship. But that is a choice that we make as a society to value that over other ways of defining sexuality and gender and coupledom, partnership. So if a person is born and doesn't ascribe to that set of rules, then heterosexism acts as a hegemony and oppresses that person's other desires. So their desire for, a man's desire for another man. Heterosexism works to hegemonically oppress that desire. The same thing goes with race, and the same thing goes with class. You guys have probably heard so many stories about people of different races dating. Native Americans dating white people, Native Americans dating black people, Chinese people dating white people. Just any kind of amalgamation you might think of. Well, we all know that if we erased society's desires from our minds, nobody would care what color anybody else was. But because we have these social constructs, those raced assumptions are built into our psyches in a way, not innately, but from birth we're hearing these raced statements, and we come to believe in these raced statements. And so all of these things oppress us, and they control even our bodies, as Thompson points out in her article about weight loss and dieting and eating disorders. Another thing that controls our body, I've written here, and this gets into the other articles for the week, another thing that controls our body is the politics of reputation. And this is something that I'm really keenly aware of in my own daily life, because I'm a tattooed person, because I shaved my head for many years and I was a bald person, a bald female person, and now because I just bought a dog, as you heard in the last video, and she's a pit bull mix. And so me and my tattooed, bandana wearing self walk out into my neighborhood and with my pit bull, and it becomes a complete politics of reputation. At first I didn't want to have to defend her at all. I was just thinking to myself, if those people out there are ignorant enough to believe everything they've read negative about pit bulls, if they're ignorant enough to basically practice a type of racism, a type of breedism, and say that because some pit bulls do bad things, all pit bulls do bad things, if people are ignorant enough to believe that, then that's fine, let them believe it. But what I learned is that makes me feel bad, and it makes my dog feel bad when people walk up to her and see what she looks like and just turn and walk the other way. And so there's a little bit of politicking that's involved here. There's a little bit of wordplay that's involved. There's a little bit of salesmanship that's involved in getting the people in my neighborhood to accept my pit bull mix as a regular dog that's not going to chew their face off, for example, to perpetuate one of the stupid horror stories that goes on out there. And so that happens all the time with pit bulls, as we all know, but that's just because that's what's happening now. 10 years ago, it was Doberman Pinschers. 20 years ago, it was the American Bulldog, and it just goes in waves. It goes in phases of what dog we're going to discriminate against this week because we think that they're all bad. Well, it doesn't take a lot to see how that translates into poverty, heterosexism, and racism. It's not that we can all just pretend like these things don't exist, because they do exist. We've made them. We've socially constructed them to exist. So we have to start tending to them a little bit. And that means that we need to start thinking about the reputations of these things. I can't let my pit bull go out without a leash and a collar and run all over the neighborhood, because that's just going to perpetuate the wrong kind of reputation for the pit bull. So I want my pit bull to be well behaved. And in the same way, we can't just all, I'm thinking of homosexual and gay marriage, for example. The whole battle for gay marriage is very interesting, because in this country, even heterosexual marriages end in 50% in divorce, and even higher than that now. So you're more likely to divorce than you are to stay married in a heterosexual marriage. So my fight against, my beef with gay marriage is gay, homosexual relationships are already very unstable because they're not recognized by society. They're also very unstable because homosexuals tend to be very queer in their thinking about relationships. So they're non-monogamous, or they're polyamorous, or etc. And so my beef with the gay marriage fight is, why would I say we because I consider myself a queer, but why would queer people want marriage rights when marriage more often than not ends in divorce? Why would we want to do that to an already sullied reputation? Why would we want to take our reputation as queer people who are wild and crazy bunch and then submit it to an institution that's doomed for failure from the beginning? It doesn't make any sense to me. So there's a little bit of reputation politics that goes on there, but that's also very oppressive because, like my dog, if I go out in public and say that I'm queer or that I'm gay or that I'm straight or that I'm white, when I label myself as one of these things, I become all of the reputation of that thing. I carry my reputation with me. So the politics of reputation is a traumatizing and it's an oppressive force. Another oppressive force, another thing that takes control away from our bodies, is being a real woman in different societies. For example, being a real woman in the 18 to 24-year-old culture on Michigan State University's campus means dressing in a North Face jacket and black tights and Ugg boots when winter rolls around. If you're not wearing that costume, that outfit, that uniform, basically you're not fitting into this cult of identity, so you're not considered one of the in crowd. And there's so much oppression taking place there. If a person just wants to wear whatever they want to wear, if a man wants to wear eyeliner, if a man wants to wear a skirt, if a woman wants to wear pants in certain societies, she's all of a sudden stigmatized and she feels the weight of that pressure pushing against her. Similarly, being a real man, as the fraternities article points out, is really detrimental. And it can hurt, it can oppress a lot of really natural desires in men, such as a male desire for another man. There's nothing organically wrong with that. It's ideologically that we have a problem with it. So all of these things add up to what I've written down here on the bottom as multiple oppressions. People are not just singly oppressed. I'm not just oppressed because I'm a woman. I'm oppressed because I'm a white, queer woman who lives in Michigan, who wears tattoos, who has a bandana on. You're not just a white, straight man. You're a white, straight man who lives in Kentucky, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things add on top of you the oppressions that you already feel as a human. So what we find is that each person in their life resides at an intersection of these multiple oppressions. So if you imagine them all barred on top of one another, you've got the oppression of race, you've got the oppression of class, you've got the oppression of gender, of sexuality, of location. You're the very, very center point of those multiple oppressions. You are standing at the intersection of those multiple oppressions. And women and gender studies calls that way of thinking about oppression not just a single oppression, but how we're all multiply oppressed. Women and Gender Studies calls that way of thinking intersectionality. And when you think about oppression that way, you see that things are much more complicated than you've thought of them in the past. It's not just racism anymore. Now it's classism and genderism and sexism, and you get the picture, excuse me. Before I run out of time, I just want to say a few things about the questions that you're going to see on the docs board. I've basically gone over a lot of the questions that I asked, but I wrote those questions up there to sort of help us steer the conversation a bit. And what I want you to do is read through those questions before you read the texts each week, and then again after you read the text each week, and really be thinking about answering those. Really try to work on the discussion board to use the texts that we've read for the week. Cite lines from them, cite quotes from them, summarize them, tell me what you're thinking about them, but answer the questions that I've given you on the wall, and use that to sort of springboard into your own discussion, right? So again, my drive here is to get us to think more critically and even more intersectionally about the texts that we have each week, to show how they're in conversation with one another and how we can have a conversation with the authors on our docs board. So thanks again for watching. Let me know if this lecture was helpful. If not, I'll try to do something different next week, and I'll see you soon.